Hello and welcome to the complete ScrubClaims walkthrough. I'm Jeff and I'll be your guide as we go through everything from beginning to end, setup, normal functions, more advanced functions, and everything in between. So first thing I want to say is this is going to be a longer video. So if you're here for the first time, great, sit back, relax. But if you're coming back to look for something specific, within this video, there are timestamps in the video description, so just scroll down, open that description, and you can click on those timestamps to jump ahead to any specific point in this video. So it's a great place to come back if you've forgotten or can't remember from the video how to do anything, just come on back here. One more thing I want to note is that parts of this video use an older version of ScrubClaims, so you might notice at some points that the UI in the video looks a little different than your current UI that you have in front of you, maybe if you're following along on your own spreadsheet. Totally fine. Any differences that are of any importance, I note in the video. So just don't worry if things look slightly different than what you're seeing in your version. Okay, let's jump in. If you're like most of my users, you probably found us through, I don't know, a Google search where you ended up on our website, saw our features, scrolled through, and decided to go ahead and check out our pricing and create a subscription. So let's go ahead and kind of take you through that. I'm going to jump on our normal monthly plan. So you'll go through this, you'll enter an email address and password if you don't have an account. That's important because you can come in and if you ever need to cancel your account or if you ever need to update billing information or something like that, you'll need that login information that you create at checkout in order to do all that stuff. So once you've entered all your information, you can go ahead and click Sign Up Now. That'll take you to an order confirmation page, and you will also receive 2 emails. The first email will be a sort of standard order confirmation email with a little information about your license key email that is impending as well. And let's go ahead and go to that email, which is the more important one. That email is going to take you through all your detailed instructions about how to get started, and it'll have your license key in there. And so let's go ahead and jump into that. The first thing you want to do is install ScrubClaims. So we'll click this link. It'll take you to the Google Workspace Marketplace page for ScrubClaims, where you can download it. The first thing I want to recognize is after you hit this install button, if you do not already have a Google account, it'll prompt you to create one, or if you're not signed into it, it'll prompt you to sign into it. If you do have an account, make sure that whichever little icon is up here is the right account that you want to use for ScrubClaims. I recommend just using whichever Google account you normally use if you already have one. It doesn't really matter that much. Sometimes when you click these links, if you're signed into more than one account, it'll open up this page and it'll take you to a different account than the one you wanted to use. So you can always click up here and see all your accounts and decide which one to switch to. You can click on the other account. Anyways, let's go ahead and click install here. And the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask you to choose the account you want to use. If you're already signed in, I'll choose my little fake Tebra user account here. Then it's going to ask for access. All we need is your email address and your name. Simple stuff there, nothing private. Any public information that you already have public will be right there. And then it's going to ask you for the more important permissions that ScrubClaims needs in order to operate. I'll go through these real quick. View and manage spreadsheets that this application has been installed in. So basically, if you use ScrubClaims in a specific spreadsheet, we need to be able to do all the functions that ScrubClaims does, like pull charges from Tebra, edit those charges within ScrubClaims, and print out results and that type of stuff. So we only have access to that specific spreadsheet that you're using ScrubClaims within. Connect to an external service. This is to connect to Tebra to pull charges and information. Only whatever you decide. We can't access anything that you don't want us to have access to. And it's also to connect to our own website in order to verify your license key and that you have a paid subscription or a free trial. Send email as you. This is the only one that sounds really different than what it is. Whichever account you use, if you want to send reports, it's going to technically send from that email address that you're using ScrubClaims within. So in our case, it'd be tebratestuser@gmail.com. However, it's going to look like it's coming directly from ScrubClaims. So it's really not sending email as you. We do it that way because it's much faster and easier to use Google's built-in service rather than having to connect to our service and pull it from there. It's more secure to do it this way. It allows us to charge less for the feature. Allow this application to run when you are not present. That's if you decide to schedule an automated version of ScrubClaims where you can have it run daily, weekly, whatever you want. It's a built-in feature that you can decide to turn on or off. and display and run third-party web content in prompts and sidebars. This is just the UI. So when you decide to enter your Tebra account information, or when you decide to run a certain function, it just opens up a little sidebar. So you're going to want to click Allow. Once you do that, it's going to take you here, where a little brief walkthrough. You can find ScrubClaims as a Google Spreadsheet add-on at the top of the sheet under Extensions, and that's an important part, which we'll discuss more. Click Next. There's some additional setup before users can start using it. This is a little video I've added, and guess what? It's the video you're watching right now. So if you haven't already opened it, hello, because it is linked. Complete ScrubClaims walk. That's funny. If you haven't already, as you can see, it's right here as well. So we'll get to that. But yeah, if you haven't already watched it, it's going to tell you, hey, watch this important setup guide. It'll help you out. Okay, once we're done, we can click Done. And then we can just go back to our email and move on to step 2. Open a new Google Sheets spreadsheet. So if you click that button, it'll do just that. If you've never used Google Sheets, welcome to Google Sheets. Again, make sure that the correct account, if you're not on the correct account, that may prompt you to have to go back here before it'll switch. So you might want to click that button first before switching to your account, and then you can go ahead and open up a blank spreadsheet once again. I recommend using Google Chrome for this, just because you can create a profile for Chrome, so that doesn't happen. Sometimes if you're using another browser like Safari or Firefox, there will be strange behavior, like if you think you're using a certain Google account, once you click that link to open, it'll use the one that you maybe were using before. So it just kind of, you have to watch out for that. That's why I bring it up. Okay, now that we're here, we can go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to click Extensions, just like it said before, and scroll down until you see ScrubClaims. And that's going to be your main menu throughout. Using ScrubClaims, every time you want to take actions, for the most part, you're going to go to Extensions, ScrubClaims, and then to this menu. If you don't see all these buttons, you might have an issue. You can reach out to us. Shouldn't happen. Everything should be set up perfectly. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to open the home page. That'll be our general spot that we'll work from to get things set up. Here we are. Welcome to ScrubClaims. This is your home page, below our setup requirements, general settings, and more. Again, it's stressing the video guide for you. I just want to make sure that people know this exists. All right, but then we'll scroll down to these 2 required items. These are the first 2 things you need to do. You need to verify your ScrubClaims account, which we showed you before. When you checked out, you got those emails and you have a ScrubClaims account. If you haven't, if you found us through the Google Workspace Marketplace before finding our website, then you can click here, and that'll open the ScrubClaims website where you can create a subscription. Okay, so let's go ahead and click this to enter our license key. Perfect, so we know that our account is tebratestuser@gmail.com, and our license key we can copy and paste from right here. Oh, by the way, you can also name your spreadsheet whatever you want, so it's easier to find later on. Okay, got our license key, got our email. Let's click Verify. And now 2 things are going to happen right here. First, it's going to verify your license key, and then it's going to automatically start copying in the template that we'll be using for ScrubClaims. So you'll start to see, as this loads and processes, invalid email for this license key. Well, that's interesting. Let's make sure I entered everything right. Yep, there's a typo. There you go. So that's the first thing you want to check, is to make sure you have copied and pasted everything correctly and you don't have a typo. So we'll try again. Okay, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to verify your license key, and then right after that, it's going to automatically start importing the template that we'll be using for ScrubClaims. So you'll be seeing, as this processes, pages start coming in and loading. There you go. Oh, there's the first one. You can see it start to come through. All these tabs at the bottom. And as that's happening, you'll see that ScrubClaims license key has been marked as valid, and everything looks good. You might see this. I believe this is just for the picture on this PullCharges page. I don't know if there's anything else, but you're going to want to, if you see that little bar there, just click Allow Access. There you go, ScrubClaims account verified. So yeah, it takes a minute or so for everything to come in, but then you should be good to go. Now please connect your Tebra accounts using the pop-up window on the right side of the screen. So just like we talked about, that'll be step 2, and we'll go ahead and click Allow Access. Yeah, it's just for that picture right there. So it's not maybe super important. I think that's all it is, but I would click Allow Access just to make sure. Okay, as the pop-up said, let's go ahead and set up our Tebra connection now. Okay, so the first thing to note is for a Tebra account to work in ScrubClaims, you need to make sure you have API access. So every Tebra account, as far as I know, has API access. You might need to request it from customer service at Tebra, or if you already have it, from your system admin for your Tebra account. And we'll get into that in just a second here. I'll go ahead and enter my Tebra email and password, hopefully without a typo this time. All right, next thing is your practice's time zone. You're going to want to make sure this matches the time zone in your Tebra account. If you know it just from operating, then you can go ahead and just click it, Central Time. If you are an account admin or have at least a certain level of access, you can click that link and it'll take you to the appropriate page that'll show your practice's time zone. If you don't have the right access, then it'll just take you to, I think, the home dashboard page, so you won't be able to see it that way. If you're not sure, just ask a system admin for your Tebra account. It's not the most important thing in the world, but I think if you're running automated reports and stuff like that, and you want to do it in the middle of the night, you want to make sure that your schedule, like if you were running it at, say, midnight, you'd want to make sure that you're on the right time zone. Otherwise, it's going to get the previous day instead of the right day, if that makes sense. We'll talk about that more later. Okay, and then the practices API key. This is the hardest part. This might be the hardest part of using ScrubClaims in general, and it's really not that hard. So if you don't know your API key, you're going to want to click this link first. So this will log us into the Tebra help section, where if you are a system admin, I believe you have to be, right here you would see a button, an extra link in between here says customer key, I believe, and you can click on that and view your API key. If you're a system admin and you come over here and you don't see it, then what you're going to want to do is create a customer care case. So yeah, I'll update these instructions, but there's a link where Tebra explains how to do that. You basically create a new case, you would follow these instructions, and they'll send you your own customer key or API key that you can use. Once it's been sent, if you are not a system admin, then your system admin needs to grant you access to that API key. So they would go into the PM system, go into settings, user accounts, and then you don't have to assign a system admin to have access. I think you can just click the permissions tab and then make sure they have web services permissions, and that'll allow that individual user to have access to the API key. Okay, so that is the hardest part. I'm going to link more detailed instructions for this so it doesn't get confusing, because it's really not that hard. It just can be 2 or 3 steps as opposed to 1 step. So I know my API key. We'll insert that here. Once you have it, it's smooth sailing. After that, enter it there, and we're going to save our Tebra account info. Just like entering the license key, it's going to say wait a few seconds while we establish your connection with Tebra and make sure it's a valid connection. Should be. Yep, we are good. You can see it over here on the right as well as in this alert box. And the second part of this is choose from your available practices in C1 of the PullCharges sheet. So what's going to happen, and here's a note right here, it might not populate until after you close this message. So your practices will automatically populate right here on the PullCharges tab. So let's go ahead and close that and watch as they show up. There you go. And since we only have access to 1 account or 1 Tebra practice under this, only 1 will show up. If you have access to more, multiple will show up in that drop down. And going forward, whenever you want to do anything, PullCharges and then ScrubClaims, you want to make sure you have the practice you want to use selected right here. So setup is good. We are good to go. We can start going over how to actually use ScrubClaims. Okay, now that we have our ScrubClaims account information entered, our Tebra connection set up, and our template for ScrubClaims has been successfully imported, we can get started. The first thing I want to do is give you a quick overview of how this generally works. There are 2 main steps with an extra step at the end, and I'll just go over that real quick. First of all, PullCharges, and that's the tab of the template we're on. You can see 5 tabs at the bottom here. That is where you pull encounters from Tebra into your ScrubClaims document, so then you can move on to step 2, which is scrubbing those encounters or claims, which is this main menu page right here, the 4th tab. So when you pull charges, they will be pulled into this page, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And when you scrub claims in step 2, they will be scrubbed and your results will show up on this page, the result scrub claims page. The final step, the extra step at the end I mentioned, is what you do with these results. You can email them to someone, you can update the encounter status of those claims in Tebra based on whether they were flagged by your rules or not flagged, and a couple other things. So the first thing I want to do is talk about those first 2 steps with you, pulling charges and scrubbing claims. But before I do that, I should mention how to take actions generally in ScrubClaims, and that is going to be via the ScrubClaims main menu, which you will find under Extensions, ScrubClaims. And here is the entire menu for ScrubClaims, where you can take every action from setup to pulling charges to scrubbing claims to adjusting results and all that. You'll notice that other than this setup menu at the top, which you can see has links to the same stuff we were doing on the homepage menu, the license key setup, Tebra account setup, auto scrub, and the template insert. So if you ever need to change something there, you can come to this menu as well. The rest of these menu items align with the sheets or tabs at the bottom of the Google Sheets document. This one is the only one that's not visible right now because it is hidden. You can choose to show it or hide it. We'll get into that later. So if you want to take action on any of these sheets, you go to the corresponding menu item. And so, instance, if you wanted to pull charges, you go to Pull Charges, and then at the bottom of that menu, Pull Charges. So let's return to our Pull Charges tab of our Google Sheets document and go over the screen here. The first thing you might notice is that your practice name, if you've done everything correctly and connected your Tebra account, has automatically appeared in C1 right up here. If you have more than one practice in your Tebra account, you have access to more than one practice, then a drop-down will appear right here, and I'm not going to click it, but you can click that, and all the practices you have access to will show up, and you can choose from whichever one you want. And whichever practice you have selected up here is what you're going to be pulling charges from, that practice's Tebra account. So you may have also noticed a long list of different filters over here. So when you pull charges or encounters from Tebra into ScrubClaims, these are the different categories in which you can filter those encounters by. So certain ones will be turned on automatically when you add your template, and certain choices will already be made, but this is all up to you. You can choose what you want. There's helpful hints. There's little, if you hover over any of these boxes, it'll tell you more information about which filter it is and what it does specifically. Same with this value column over here. It'll give you more information about how to enter the data, what it means maybe, or more. If you see a triangle, that means it's a drop-down box. You can choose from the drop-down menu any of these options. For any of these date filters, I believe there's 8 total: service date, modified date, posting date, or created date. You can either double-click on the boxes to select a date from the calendar menu that pops up, or you can enter a date manually. However, if you enter a date manually, you have to make sure it matches this format with the year first dash month with 2 digits, and then day with 2 digits as well, and the year with 4 digits. So it's easier just to go from the calendar, but if you're pulling something really old, I suppose it might be easier to type it in, but you have to make sure you get the format right. Now, let me say first of all that unless you are a very large practice where you just have thousands and thousands of encounters that you're pulling in, I would recommend leaving this part as simple as possible. Choose a service date, pull it all in, scrub them all. If you have specific encounters that you know are going to be the only ones that are going to be incorrect, maybe it's a certain provider that's making an error or something like that, then maybe you filter them on the front end. But a lot of people that use this just pull in all their encounters and then do all the filtering and the scrubbing on the back end. That way you don't miss anything. I've designed ScrubClaims to run very quickly. You can do 7, maybe 8,000 encounters in a single pull, and it'll only take you a few minutes to do that. So unless you're hitting that number or going over that number and you can't figure out a schedule that works to keep it under that number, then I would say just leave it pretty broad on this side. One final thing to note is the max date range you can pull for service date or posting date or any of the other date options is a 60 date range. That's not our rule, that's Tebra's rule. They don't want clients pulling massive amounts of data, years and years worth, over and over again and clogging their servers. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and pull some charges so you can see what that process looks like. I'm just going to pull by service date, just 1 month of data. I'm using a training database, so I've entered in custom dates where I know I have some example encounters. Not very many, but you can see sort of what it looks like. So we'll just go to extensions, ScrubClaims, PullCharges, and PullCharges again, and press go. And you'll see running script up here. That means it's going. You'll also see status updates in D1 up here, as well as down here in the bottom right-hand corner, which is nice because you can switch pages and still get those updates while it's running. So go back, and here's where our results will show up. 2 pages, the results PullCharges page and the full results PullCharges page. Now the reason we have these 2 pages is because the full results have 179 pieces of data for every single encounter, which is a very large Excel document. You might not want to see all that information. You might only be concerned about a few pieces of information. So that's why we have the results PullCharges sheet, where you can customize the exact columns you want to see by using these drop-down menus and changing them to whatever you wish. And that way, when you pull charges, I can just see it. The few bits of information I'm concerned about that I want to maybe be checking for later when I scrub claims. Yeah, you definitely want to include in this menu whatever pieces of data might be incorrect, whatever you're searching for in your scrub claims rules, which we'll talk about later, because that's what's going to show up on your eventual scrub claims results page, is whatever columns you've selected here. So you can even say you weren't sure what pieces of information you wanted when you were pulling those charges. You might want to be able to go to your full results and say, you know what, I really needed that encounter diagnosis ID 1. Or you might not even know what that is until you pull charges and you can kind of see as an example. That's why I have this page for you guys to be able to look through, see specifically what data you want. You can even go up here to the top of the column and see an explanation of each individual piece of data in each column on this page, and then choose which ones you want. But say you did pull them and now you know you need that encounter diagnosis ID, you can actually say, okay, say I don't need adjusted charges. I'm just going to say I need. You can either scroll down and select it, or you can just delete it and type it, and if it matches something, it'll pop up. So I really need that. I don't want to pull charges again, although you could. That's a simple solution. You can also just go to extensions, scrub claims. Now you're on your results pull charges tab, so you want to go to that menu, and you can refresh that results data. So it'll take your already pulled charges and it'll update this page with those extra columns that you added or took away. Now, say you're getting pretty good at this, you no longer need this full results page, you know what columns and pieces of information you're looking for, you can just go up to extensions, scrub claims, full results, show or hide full results sheet, and that'll go ahead and hide it for you. If it's hidden already, then pushing that button will show it. If it's showing, then pushing that menu button will hide it for you. One more thing I wanted to mention is that on your results pull charges page, 2 columns that will always show up no matter whether you choose them or not are encounter ID and encounter status. Now the reason these both show up is because if you do want to do one of the later steps, which we will talk about, which is changing your encounter status in Tebra based on whether the claim that you're scrubbing was flagged as incorrect or correct, you need to have that encounter ID. We can't run that operation without the encounter ID, and we can't change the status without knowing the current status. So that's the main reason. The other reason is if you were going to send these results to somebody and have them manually go in and make changes to, say, a procedure code or something like that that might have been flagged as incorrect, then they're going to have a heck of a hard time finding the encounter you're talking about without the encounter ID and also without the encounter status. So those are the two main reasons. So if you see those automatically populate on your results pull charges, maybe at the very end, it might be like, why is that there? Well, that's why. Okay, now that we've gone over pulling charges, let's move on to step 2, which is scrubbing claims. Now, as you can see, I've gone ahead and populated a very simple, straightforward rule for us to get started on understanding how rules are created, how they are formatted, and how they work. So basically, a rule is just checking an aspect of an encounter to make sure that it is correct. You can check for all sorts of things. I'll get into that. Up at the top of this page, you will see all these column headers that if you hover the mouse over, you have descriptions that will kind of explain in a more simplified version what I'm talking about here. So you can always fall back on these. But basically, the structure of a rule is that every rule starts with this first line on. So if you want this rule to be off, you would just turn it off, but the first line of the rule has to have either on or off, so the program when it runs knows whether to apply it or not. And you may or may not have noticed that the current version of ScrubClaims actually has more than just off or on as the selections here. This is an older version that we're using for this video. The new version has 3 on options: regular on manual scrub only, and on auto scrub only. So on, and we'll discuss this further, we haven't gone into this yet, but on will run all the time no matter what. On manual is what we're doing right now, is a manual scrub, but later when you schedule, if you choose to schedule an auto scrub, you can have rules that only exist in auto scrub, so they won't run when you're doing manual runs. But again, we'll talk about that later. Don't worry about it too much now. And then you start with, very simply, straightforward, start of rule, and if, the way a question starts, if. And then the end of every rule ends with end of rule, last line, and then add note / apply options. That's the basic structure. And now let's talk about what happens in between. First of all, this group start and group end in column D and H, those are optional columns. I'll discuss those further later, but right now we're going to skip them. So let's say we want to check for a specific procedure code. Maybe we know that 99308 is accidentally being entered, and we don't want that to happen. We know that the correct code that we're looking for is 99309. In this instance, let's assume that 99308 is not a real procedure code. So we know that anytime that 99308 appears, it's incorrect, and it needs to actually be 99309. Say this has been happening repeatedly. So we just say procedure code equals 99308, and that's all we're checking for. So we can go ahead and end the rule, and this value here, we can skip over these 2 columns because we don't need to look for a specific encounter item because the rule has ended. But here we can enter a specific value. Well, really, up here is a value. Down here it's a note. We can leave a note for the claim. So when it shows up in our results scrub claims page, when we scrub our claims, it'll show up here, and it'll give a note if it's flagged as incorrect. If the rule catches it and flags it, it'll leave this note here saying what's going on and why it was flagged. That way, whoever is going through these results, if you send it to somebody, they'll know, hey, this is why this was flagged, and they'll know how to correct it in Tebra. So again, yeah, it's a very simple rule. A lot of rules are going to be a little bit more complicated than this, but that's the basic structure. All right, let's go ahead and expand on this rule and see if we can make it a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that because this is not going to be the last line of our rule anymore. Okay, so say 99308 is an actual code that is used sometimes, so simply checking for it won't give us the answer to whether it was used incorrectly. Maybe we need to check the procedure name too to see if that is the correct name. So we'll go to this 3rd column here. We'll say we need to check for something else, so we'll add an and. If procedure code equals 99308 and the procedure name equals, oh shoot, I don't remember what the procedure name is. And this is important because this needs to match exactly what is in Tebra. If it doesn't equal specifically what we're looking for, then it's not going to get flagged. So what can we do? Well, you can see right here we have next to procedure code a little drop down. And this lists all of our procedure codes that have shown up in our pulled charges that we have pulled already. How did that get there? Well, we can go to Extensions, ScrubClaims. We're on the ScrubClaims sheet, so we'll go to that. And we'll go to Populate, Refresh Filters from Pulled Charges. So what this does is every time you have an encounter item selected in any row or any column on this page, it'll look for that and it'll populate it with all available options of that specific encounter item. If you have nothing listed there, then it's not going to do anything. But now you can see, oh, all our procedure names are correctly listed right there. So rather than having to copy and paste it from here or try to type it from memory and then have issues, we can just select it. So it's really easy. And so it just refreshed this one. It didn't do anything to it. You can also remove all filters. You saw that in the menu maybe, but this is the simpler version, is just to refresh it. Okay, so we are checking for an incorrect use of 99308. Now 99308, I believe, is a 15-minute nursing facility care visit, and 99309 is a 30-minute visit. So we could go ahead and put this 30-minute visit here, so we would know that anytime 99308 appears with this 30-minute visit procedure name tag, we would know that, hey, that's meant to be a 99309, not a 99308. So we could say, perfect. Then we can end our rule. End of rule, then add notes that apply options. Procedure name indicates 99309, but procedure code shows 99308. Please check. Maybe it's as simple as that. And then the person who's going through these can check to make sure that was entered incorrectly. We can know maybe from this that it likely was, but who knows. Okay, so that's a little bit better rule. It gets more down into what may have happened and whether we're actually flagging an incorrect claim. But maybe we can go even further than that. Maybe we know from our own experience that it's just a couple of providers that are making this mistake. So maybe all we want to check for and flag are 2 providers that might be incorrectly marking a 99309 as a 99308. So we'll go ahead and remove that again. So we'd have to say if procedure code equals 99308 and procedure name equals this, and provider name, rendering provider name equals, let's say from our results page that it's Ron Mexico. That's a Cougar Town shout out for anyone who gets that. So we'll populate our filters with Ron Mexico in just a moment, but we're checking for 2 different providers who this might have happened for. So we can't say and rendering provider equals this, because then it's checking for an encounter that has 2 providers listed as the rendering provider. So we have to check or. The problem is if you're combining and or in the same question, then this isn't going to work unless you separate them, unless you add parentheses. So this is a relatively simple concept that we all understand, but I find it's kind of hard to explain in context like this. So it's easier to give an example. So say I told you to go to the store and get me apples and bananas or oranges. You would say, wait, what? Do you want me to get you either apples and bananas or just oranges? Or do you want me to get you apples and then either bananas or oranges? You need that extra language, and in this case it's parentheses to separate what you're actually looking for. Now in our rule, if we don't have the parentheses, the function might think you're checking for either procedure code, procedure name, and the rendering provider equals this, or just the rendering provider equals this. You know what I mean? But if you add the parentheses, it knows to check for procedure code, procedure name, and whether the provider name is this or this. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I'm not quite sure how to explain it any better than that, but the general rule is that if you are using and or within the same rule, you have to have parentheses separating them. If you don't, then the rule will not work, and even more than that, ScrubClaims won't run. It'll get flagged and you'll be alerted and you can have your issue corrected. And we'll go over that in just a moment as well. So let's go ahead and refresh our filters so we can put in the 2 folks we're looking for. You can see your status is updating right there, as well as down there. Very quick, it's finished. We'll say Ron Mexico or Susie Sosa. So we know that if it's either of those, that's even more likely to be incorrect. And we can go ahead and end our rule. It looks like our rule is good to go. We can go ahead and scrub our claims. Now, one thing you might want to do before you do that, it's not necessary, you can go to this ScrubClaims, verify rules. Now what this will do, for any rules that are turned on, it'll look through them, make sure that functionally they work, that they work how they should. There, you get it. Rule verified. Your rules have been verified. You may close the sidebar and proceed with scrubbing claims. Okay, now if I were to switch this to an OR, then we would have an and and an OR outside of the parentheses, and if I ran the rule verifier again, it would get flagged. It would tell you what was wrong and how to change it. I can give you an example of that if you would like. We can just go ahead and say, let's start the rule with an and instead of an if, and run the rule verifier. Oh, invalid rule. An error was found in your rule, see note below. Row 2, rule must start with if. So that's always nice to have. If you're not quite sure, you can check it, and it will also run when you scrub claims. Before scrubbing starts, it checks your rules to make sure they are valid, and then it proceeds with scrubbing claims. And if it finds an error in your rule, it'll stop it, give you that same alert, and you'll know that you need to fix it before scrubbing claims. So that's helpful. So our rules look good. Let's go ahead and proceed with scrubbing claims. So we'll just head up to our extensions menu, scrub claims, and scrub claims one more time. And as this goes, you'll see the running script. You'll see your rule checker run first right here. You'll see status updates, rule verified, there it is, and the updates down here as well. And as this finishes, should be pretty quick. You'll get your complete update right here. Number of claims scrubbed, 12, issues found 2, claims that those issues affected 2 also, and we're good to go. And I think our PullCharges, I don't know if I mentioned, also has those final status updates right there. But now we can head back and look at our results, where they'll show up right here. And you'll see the highlighted rows. Those are any encounters that have matched the criteria you set forth in your rules, that the rules have AKA flagged, will show up highlighted with your notes that you provided for any of those claims. So we have those 2 claims. Now from here, there are a few different things you can do. Now one thing I like to mention first is that there is a historical results page as well that is hidden by default, but you can always show it. And what that sheet will have is all claims that have ever been flagged by your claim scrubber. So it'll show the date that you scrubbed them. So you can see our 2 most recent ones right there that were flagged. It'll show the notes for why they were flagged. It'll show the practice as well. As if you have access to more than one practice, you want to make sure you know which practice that those were concerning. And then it'll have all the other columns that you already selected. And you can always, just like with the results PullCharges page, if you want this historical page to have different columns, you can go over here. You can change them first and then go to refresh results history data, and that'll update your full history with the new columns that you've selected. So one thing I want to note is that an encounter will only show up in your historical data one time, provided that it was flagged for the same reasons, i.e. the note is the same. So these 2 are actually the same encounter as each other, these 2 in rows 2 and 3 and rows 4 and 5. However, I have a slightly different note here. You can ignore that because we're just trying to broaden the column here. So this actually says 99310 for these 2. And now it really should be 99309. I'm just trying to show you an example here. If these notes had been the same, if they had been a match, then these 2 encounters would not have shown up again in the historical results. So every time you scrub claims, and any claims are flagged, as long as they are not identical, they will show up here. You can have up to 2,500 rows or encounters before it starts to overwrite the old ones, because once it gets to a super high number, it's just going to slow the whole process down, and you don't want that. So I think 2,500 should be a good long history of flagged claims for you to go back and look at and email or do whatever you want with. And that brings me to my next point. You can also email these results. You can email both your historical results and your current results. All you got to do is go up to Extensions, Results, Email Results. And for historical results, I can't say that word right now, you would do Email Historical Results. So we'll try the current results. It's going to pop up another sidebar here. We haven't talked about auto scrub right now, but if you had auto scrub settings saved, you could just populate this with those. But for in this case, we'll do person@aol.com. If you wanted to add another person, you could just do 2 people. You can keep adding people. Up to 7 people can be emailed this at one time. And when you're ready, you'll just push send. I'll go ahead and do an example for you with one person. We'll do at ScrubClaims.com and push send. It'll say sending email, and it'll let you know when it has successfully sent. There you go, with a little summary of who you sent it to. And again, this is the thing where it's going to send from technically the email address you have up here for your Google account, but it'll look like it's coming from ScrubClaims. Now we do that because it's more secure, simpler, way faster to just send it from your Google account that you're using for this spreadsheet. Google has built-in stuff that make that process way simpler to just do it that way. We could send it from ours, but we'd have to talk to our servers and do all these steps. That would just slow down the process and make it unintuitive. So that's why we do it that way. Okay, another feature we have is the ability to update encounter statuses in Tebra based on these results. So I would go to there. Again, you can populate with your auto run settings if you want to just fill out this form quicker if you're doing it manually, or you can just go down here. Now you have 2 options. You can change the encounter status of claims that were flagged as incorrect by your scrubber, or change the encounter status of claims that were not flagged as incorrect, so if they pass the test. Or you can do both. It's just a personal preference. One method that people use that requires, a strict adherence to operational standards is to have all claims that are sent to ScrubClaims be in an encounter status of review. And then if they pass the claim scrubber, they get updated to approved. And if they do not pass and they get flagged by the claim scrubber, then we change them to rejected. You don't have to do it that way. Some people like to just only reject claims that are flagged by the claim scrubber and not do anything with ones that pass the test. And honestly, a lot of people like to just not even mess with the encounter status updates at all. They just create a schedule where they're auto scrubbing every week. The next day, someone goes through all the claims that have been flagged by the claim scrubber, and then the following day, all those claims for the past week get submitted because you know that they've been reviewed by the claim scrubber and have been adjusted if necessary. So if you can just set up a schedule that way, some people find that easier than trying to make sure we're updating all the encounter statuses to the right status every time. But if you wanted to use the encounter status update, you would choose your selections, push update. It would tell you, just like with the email, it's in progress and when it's finished. Okay, that covers the basic functionality of ScrubClaims. One thing we have not discussed yet is auto scrub. So to set that up, you're going to go to Extensions, ScrubClaims, Setup, Schedule Auto Scrub. You can also go to your home page, as you saw before. It's on there, which will link to this same page right here. That X means it's not been set up yet or it's not turned on. The green check marks mean that it would be turned on. As you can see, the license key and Tebra account information is valid. That's why they have green check marks. So we'll go ahead and click that. It'll open up our auto scrub sidebar. Now, what I just took you through was the manual version of ScrubClaims. If you're scrubbing claims manually, first you pull charges, then you scrub those claims, scrub those charges, and then you decide what you want to do with your results. Email them, update encounter statuses. When you have auto scrub on, it's running all 3 of those steps sequentially. First, it runs PullCharges, followed by ScrubClaims, followed by any of these options that you have to manually select in here. Email notifications or encounter status updates. If you have them both off completely, then it'll just do the first 2 steps. And you can come and check your results on the results ScrubClaims page. For auto scrub, first thing you want to do is either turn it on or off. If you turn it on, then you can choose to have it run daily, weekly, monthly, any of those, and then you can choose the time it runs. Most people have it run in the middle of the night. If you have your time zone set up correctly, then you can do this midnight to 1 a.m. I always recommend something more like 3 to 4 a.m. just in case there are time zone discrepancies, but it should work fine, and you'll know pretty quickly if it's not working as intended if your dates are off. Small thing, probably not an issue for most people. But yeah, if you choose weekly, you can choose which day of the week it runs and what time on that day. If you choose monthly, you can choose which day of the month it runs and then what time. Obviously, you're not going to want to choose the 29th, 30th, or 31st, really, especially the 31st, because some months don't have those days. So I always recommend running it. If you're going to run it monthly, I think most people will do it a little more frequently. You could do the first of the month, and then you're going to want to go down here and set up your PullCharges settings. So it's just like this menu over here, except you do it all from right here. So say you're having it run by created date. If you have it on, it's basically just going to go to default to auto. That means it's going to run entirely based on the schedule you create. So if it's monthly and you run it on the 1st, it's going to run the previous month. If you do it weekly, it's going to run the previous 7 days. So it'll run on Monday, and it'll run basically the previous Monday through up until Sunday or the day before this, so yesterday. That's how auto works. It's the easiest way to do it. I think a lot of people would do it that way. But you can also choose, and you can choose basically the same thing that would do automatically if you have concerns. So for auto on a monthly, you could say this is from created date, so the first day of the previous month, or if say you want to leave a month gap if you're doing by service date and you want to make sure all the service dates are in there or something like that. That's a kind of an extreme example, but you do it maybe on a weekly basis if you're doing that. But say first day of previous month to created date on last day of previous month. Then you can run it on the 3rd or something like that if you're doing it by service date, and it would still give you the same date range. And then you're obviously, if you have anything else that you want to do, certain providers or certain encounter statuses, you would just turn those on as well. So that's the key here. You set up PullCharges from this tab rather than this tab. And there's a reason for that, which I'll come back to in just a little bit here. Now on ScrubClaims settings, you do not set anything up here. You use your rules from your ScrubClaims page. You just have to make sure, as this describes, that they're either on or on-auto scrub only. So if you have something that's on manual scrub only, when your auto scrub runs, it's not going to do anything with those rules. It's going to ignore them. But if it's either of these ones, on means it runs for manual and auto scrub, and on auto scrub only means it only runs for auto scrub. So you just want to make sure, as long as you have auto scrub running, that no one edits or deletes any of those rules that you need for auto scrub within the ScrubClaims sheet. And then below that, you have your email notifications and encounter status update settings that you can choose to turn those on, have it go to whoever you want, up to 7 recipients for every single scrub session that runs. And then encounter status, you can choose to update the status of incorrect claims that have been flagged as incorrect by the claim scrubber, and or claims that have been marked as without errors, so no errors were found by the claim scrubber. So a lot of people, at the very least, have email notifications turned on. Depending on your operational system, you want to maybe notify every time it runs, so whoever does your final checks before claims are sent to insurance can go in and check for those scrub claim errors that have been flagged, and then approve those claims. The more advanced version would be to use encounter status updates. So you would make sure that you're only pulling charges with encounter statuses of, say, in review. And then when your claim scrubber goes through them, if it finds an error and marks it as incorrect, then it would change the encounter status automatically to rejected. And if it passes the scrub claim rules and finds no errors, then it would mark them as approved, and they get sent to insurance that way. Yeah, and the reason we have it's set up where you can choose PullCharges in here, but not ScrubClaims, is because we want to make sure you have the option to continue to run manual claim scrubs without messing up your auto scrub settings. So if you weren't able to edit PullCharges separately, then you wouldn't be able to PullCharges manually in between auto scrubs, like during the day. If you're having auto scrub run at night, you wouldn't be able to do that and then also run ScrubClaims. With ScrubClaims here, you can just use on manual only, and then you're able to do both at the same time, if that all makes sense. Yeah, you can have one practice going on auto scrub at a time, but then you can run several different practice on manual. So you can change this practice right here for manual runs because it'll still be saved in your auto scrub setting right here. And once you've chosen your settings, all you're going to do is hit save, and it's very simple. One final thing I want to talk to you about, and that should pretty much cover the overall training. If you ever accidentally delete something or mess up the template, say I was meaning to type over here, but I typed right here. First of all, you're going to get a notification if you're editing something you shouldn't be, like say a key part of the template. Editing this box, that is your name of your filter, is kind of a key thing you don't want to lose. So you're going to get this warning that says you were trying to edit part of the sheet that shouldn't be changed accidentally. If you want to do it anyway, you can say OK, or you should probably say cancel. If you were editing this line, you would get no such warning. So now that's not to say that these security settings are perfect. When I want to, for instance, make a column bigger or smaller, I might get this notification as well. We have it set up so you shouldn't be editing any of these rows where your important information is stored. So you'll get that warning there. However, right here, you're allowed to edit. Of course you are, because you need to be able to choose the columns you want. So if I was going to adjust the width of this column, I'm going to get that same warning because technically I'm editing the entire column. There's no way to kind of get around that. So you might get those, but just be careful with what you're doing. But if you ever do run into an issue, like say, oh no, somehow I got here and I deleted this whole sheet. It shouldn't happen, but it could. Oh no, that's a pretty key thing. I can't pull charges without that sheet. All you got to do is go to Extensions, ScrubClaims, Insert/Fix Template. It's going to run, it's going to check to make sure all your pages are here. If you're missing any sheets, it's going to insert them. It's going to reorder them for you at the end, so it'll look just like it did before it got messed up. And if it doesn't find any sheets missing, if everything looks good, well, it'll give you that notification first of all, since it did find a missing sheet. It fixed it for you. But if everything looks good, then it might do something else. So we'll go over that. Say I did this. I just deleted a whole bunch of these. Shouldn't have done it. Oh no, I can't remember what those were supposed to say. Whoops. So I'm going to go to Extensions, Setup, Insert, Fix Template again. Now it's going to go through and check to make sure I have all my sheets there. It's going to say, oh, your whole template's present. Are you having a more specific issue? Yes, I am. I am having an issue with my PullCharges sheet specifically. I deleted stuff I shouldn't have, so I'm going to go ahead and check PullCharges, and I'm going to reset that sheet. Now, it's important to note, it doesn't apply here, but if you have, like say your ScrubClaims sheet was something you screwed up, say you deleted like one of these header columns up here that you needed, it's going to reboot this entire sheet, which means you'll lose whatever rules you created. So you might want to do like some sort of like copy paste situation right here. Copy it, run the template fixer, and then paste it back in when you get back in. You shouldn't run into this problem too often. As you can see, the sheet has been fixed. Everything looks good again. Okay, one final thing. This is truly the last thing. This may seem obvious to some of you, but if you have not used Google Sheets before, it's not so obvious. So how do you find ScrubClaims going forward? Say you want to close this browser tab, how do you come back? Well, you can do one very simple thing, and I think I'll add a fifth step to this email with a link to just Google Sheets. All you got to go to is sheets.google.com. If you're logged in under your correct Google account right here, it'll take you here, and if you've named your sheet, which I mentioned at some point in this video, it'll go right here and you can just open it up and you're back in. And yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but you can click right here to rename your sheet whatever you want. So I'll include a link in the email. Also, you can just bookmark this page in your browser. I think for most browsers, whichever tab you have opened here will get bookmarked as well. So it'll always open up in the PullCharges or ScrubClaims page or whichever page you have open when you bookmark it. But those are two simple ways to just always find your way back to ScrubClaims. There you go. And that should pretty much cover it. I don't have a whole lot else to share. If you guys have anything else, you can always reach out to us via email or contact form, or you can comment on this video. Good luck and happy scrubbing. Is that something I should say? All right.